Okay, fellow citizens of Regions 5 and 6, welcome to Alliance on the Move. Tonight we have a very high-powered panel with you, not me. We have one of the founders of the Alliance for Change, Mr. Kemraj Ramchatan, and former Minister of Public Security. And we have Ms. Laura George, who is from the Upper Maz and has been an indigenous rights activist for a long time. As you know, elections are coming up, and we are going to be discussing development in Regions 5 and 6, what has actually happened over the last 5 years, and also what could have happened and what are some of the plans that the Alliance for Change has for Regions 5 and 6. I just want to give you some context so that you understand exactly what resources were available to Guyana, and more particularly what resources were available to Regions 5 and 6 for development. So since about the end of 2022, Guyana was up to 660,000 barrels per day, which is the equivalent of 65 million Guyana dollars per hour. That's what our country was earning, and that's about $1.5 billion per day. And that has been available to this country since the end of 2022, early 2023. So it is a significant amount of money. So we have to look at how we collectively as a country have spent that money, what sort of development we have seen in Regions 5 and 6, and what plans have been put in place. Now, I know in an election season, a lot of people come with a lot of promises, but one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is, what actually happened in the last 5 years? So I want to start off with a son of the soil from Region 6, and that is Kemraj Ramchatan, who has sat in Parliament for the last 5 years, who has been in Parliament. I think he must be a grandfather in Parliament now. Kemraj, I think, has been in Parliament close to 30 years or 30 plus
years. Since 1992.
But I want to ask, since 1992, wow. Now that's a long time, consistently since 1992. That must be some sort of a record. But I do want to ask Kemraj, if you could trace what development has taken place in Region 6, and possibly Region 5 as well, over the last 5 years.
Well, thank you very much, Nigel. I want to state that having asked that question, it just doesn't fly out what the developments have been, because they are very scanty indeed. What I can tell you is that the contractor class has gotten very much many contracts, friends, family, and favorites, to do bridges, to do roadworks, to do a number of drainage and irrigation and things like that, all of which, after a 9-month period, require rehabilitation. And this is something that the Barbicians will know very much of. The infrastructural works that have happened now that the oil monies are there at what you say about $65 million an hour, is being mismanaged. And it is largely the mismanagement of that oil money, having the oil secured through an agreement of production agreement in 2016, that then realized monies in around 2019 December, and then 2020, 2021, and all of that, where we are seeing a grand mismanagement of it, Nigel. And only a few people can have the luxuries, and sometimes, not sometimes, the majority of the times, the major players, namely the rice farmers, the cane cutters of Berbice, inclusive of those in Region 5 and in Region 6, not being able on very many days to have 3 meals a day. It is that stark. No, I'm not joking here. I was recently in Berbice.
So you think that some of the Karen harvesters can't afford 3 meals a day for their families?
Absolutely, Nigel. And this is what you hear when you go at the bottom houses, when you go and you talk to them, when you telephone you. They just can't make it. Sugar is doing real bad, and we will come to that. They're
I
not
wanted to
getting the
discuss
days
that,
of
yeah.
employment and all of that. And the rice prices, because of a pest called Gandhi, and also the bad weather that has affected the peasant farmers in relation to baigan and bora and so many of the other crops that they would normally plant. You go now to the markets, even at Port Morant and Albion and Williamsburg, it is huge prices for these vegetables and greens and so on. And they have indicated that they are not in a position, probably a whole week, not to eat meat and so on, because meat prices also have gone up. But especially the vegetables at this moment. And so it is very, very difficult.
Oh,
And the more I think about it, Nigel, it is a negative that I will say as having been the developments over the year. Many, many negatives. And the Bobitians will tell you, remember when we went to Blackbush, they were talking about their rice and this and that. They talk so much about the unemployment in so many other
yep,
areas.
yep.
So I just
I
want to
wanted to
make that
ask you, so
negative. There, go ahead.
Gaisuco has been the major industry in Berbice for a long time. We have seen the production literally plummet downwards. And every time we hear about a plan for Gaisuco, somebody's always coming to rescue Gaisuco, but nobody's actually succeeded. So we've had Safe Narayan Singh. Before that, we had a lot of professional people, Mr. Hanneman and various other persons who have tried to save Gaisuco. Now, I would be the first to say that Gaisuco is so central to a lot of the social development, well, the social sustainability of several communities, particularly in East Berbice. What is the real reason why we have never actually been able to turn Gaisuco around? And certainly not in the last 5 years.
Well, it is largely what the Commission of Inquiry headed by Thomas had indicated prior to our what you call right sizing of the industry in 2018. Look, and Errol Hanneman, who was appointed under the APNU AFC government as the CEO of Gaisuco, had also indicated as much. What we need, because of certain reasons, the monies that the PPP had gotten from the European Union, about 100, I think it's 111 million US dollars, none went into the industry to invest in better factories and also bettering the estate management and so on. There was also a shortage of workers because this next generation don't want to go and cut cane. It's back-breaking jobs. As they would say in Berbice, slave work da. Me no want to do that. So they were having plenty shortage of labor. Then we also had GAU, the union, that was having massive strikes almost for any minuscule problem. And over a 10-year period prior to the 2018 period, Errol Hanneman had calculated that over 1 million man days were losses as a result of strikes called by GAU. So GAU was another problem. Then, as of course, the world market price had gone down because of the preferential treatment that we used to get from the European Union. I want us to restate all of these because sometimes the sugar workers and Barbicians have short memories. They want to feel that it is the APNU AFC that damaged this industry. It is not we who damaged it. Long before that, the monies from the European Union was not coming in, and then the preferential market went. So whereas we used to get double the world market prices for a ton of sugar, we started getting world market prices. And the world market prices were largely less than our production cost in Guyana. So we really were literally giving away our monies, as it were, through the sugar when we say that we got to sell at this world market price now and our production cost was so much. These are some of the factors.
I'm going to come back to you on how you think Gaisuko should be managed. But we have this lovely lady in the room, Laura. And Laura, I know that a few weeks ago you went up the Corentyne River to one of the indigenous communities up there, Oriala. I think it might have been your first or second trip to Oriala. Can you tell us what you observed in terms of development in Oriala, and what would be some of your recommendations for the development of that community?
All right. Thank you, Nigel. From what I heard, I want to give the perspective from what I gathered from the residents of Oriala and some persons in Secunda. That generally, they say that, there has been an improvement in, like, for example, receiving electricity, though it has been on and off because of several factors. So there's a general feeling that things are improving. But what I know that they haven't realized is that the amount of resources that Guyana has today, if utilized properly, appropriately, fairly, for Oriala to receive, or communities, let's say, for example, in Region 5, to receive, it should be so much better for them. And sad to say, while we were there, one of the areas, though, that they were very concerned about was the lack of employment for the youth. And they spoke about, their young people having to leave, the community in search of jobs. They spoke of the young people. Sorry.
No, sorry. I was just going to ask you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
They spoke
My
of their young
apologies.
people, the young people having to leave, to get higher education. And sometimes they do not return to the community. So whilst it appears that there can be some money floating in the community, it really isn't there because, again, if they understood that there is an opportunity for so much improvement in the community, I think they would really be calling out for, look, we have a right to this, and we deserve so much better. If you recall, the boat captain that dropped us was a former Toshao who spoke about the challenges that they were having in the community, which were not making out into the public, the information that was not getting out in public, about the health sector. The education, at that point, they had said it was going to be the first time that their students would be sitting the CSEC examination in the village itself. The secondary school was under construction. The police, the police station was under construction. But really generally, when it came to livelihood support, for example, in terms of anybody in the community getting the contract to build a school, to build the police station, or those major infrastructures, was really being done by persons from outside the community. So there wasn't going to be that long-term financial flow in the community. And if you also remember that something that I really, really didn't get to raise was how much access to proper or equal health services they should be getting, or they should have, but not getting that because at that time I knew of the challenges they had in terms of transporting their patients who are probably in critical condition, or patients who need a lot more expert,
Mm.
you
Yeah.
know, medical
So people
treatment
who have
had to be transported by boat.
so
In
just
treacherous
let me
waters.
understand that.
Sure.
People who had medical emergencies in Oriala, the only way they can get to the hospital, which is on the coast, is by boat.
Yes, it's by boat,
Oh, and
which
that
takes
takes
place, yeah, it
an
takes
hour and a
place at
half,
all hours,
2 hours.
treacherous waters, dangerous times. And we know that the very boat captain who had also transported us, a former Tushao, lost his life in the wee hours of the morning and was only found the next morning in daylight. You know, which was really sad, but that
Yeah.
was the experience that the community has. My point in saying all of this is Oriala, the village of Oriala, Siparota is beautiful. They have a lot of resources, but to really get those resources organized into value added and also being able to access services as equal or better as any other coastal communities, they really are still to get those. So that's what I wanted to point out.
Okay. Sure. Kemraj, I think it was the president this week or late last week, spoke about reopening estates and reviving the sugar industry. I know he's taken 5 years to say this. What do you think about that proposal?
Well, it's a pie in the sky. Elections is about 2 months, 3 months away, or less than that. And so they have this capacity to come up with, especially to their base support, and say, well, we are going to revitalize the sugar industry. They had been in government since 2020, and what have they done with it? We had a Commission of Inquiries report. We had also the CEO's statement on the issue. And in view of all of that, we indicated that what is required is a right sizing, that is, go to the factories and the estates that are profitable, because some are so derelict, like Wales and all of that, and you have to merge the estates now to supply IFLUC and so on. And see, like Albion is a powerful factory, ensure that Albion operates. But these fellas started initially to spend monies thinking that Skeldon, which was the worst investment since independence by the PPP and or any other government, the PPP's Keldon investment over 200 million US dollars that went down the drain just like that, closed down literally. Now, what we had indicated is that you have to close up these estates and factories that we had indicated and give the farmers the land, whether it is 25 acres plot and or 15 acres plot, depending on the availability of the land. Because for certain areas, you still have to open up housing schemes, you still have to open up recreational parks, and so on. Diversification. And do not go into spending billions and billions of dollars back into rehabilitating estates and factories that are no good. But that is what they have done. They have spent a lot of money on sugar.
But let me ask you this, Kemraj. Surely their support base, which a lot of it comes from the sugar industry, I mean, they lived the experience of failed Gaisuko. What do you think their reaction will be when the president comes and says, "Oh, we're going to reopen all these estates again"?
Oh, I had that question posed to them. What do you think about what the
Are you
president
there?
talking about? Yeah, and the people laugh and say, what kind of madness he coming with now? This is but surely insanity at its best, because we are not going to get anything out of sugar because of the world market prices now. What the economics of it, Nigel, is telling the people themselves that we are not going to get better with further revitalization of the sugar industry. You have to
But
right size. And the other thing is spend the billions that he would want to spend on sugar on farmers who will be retrained for other diversified crops. They have said that they want to go into soya cultivation. We had indicated that for food security, that you got to go into what is called a 4Ps program. And we had started in the Alternative Livelihoods program, training of people to do prawns, plantains, pumpkins, and peppers. And this is important because these products can be formed into tertiary products, which are going to make, like an acre of peppers is going to be almost 5 times more profitable than an acre of cane. And if you have intensive agriculture doing the work and the basis rate, that is where you're going to create employment on the part of the cane farmers and the cane cutters who are now going to be displaced by giving them an opportunity. But it requires some training. And we had indicated that once the oil money comes in, we are certainly going to do far better a job at alternative livelihoods. And it is not only for the purposes of giving them training in these areas of prawns farming and cultivation, inland fishing, tilapia and all of that. It is also taking some of the money to do what is called a startup in relation to rearing sheep and a cattle and things like that. I remember even the AFC had done something like that at Letem when we gave a cattle, a cow, a heifer, sorry, to some people up there. Heifers, that is. So it is important that you do the startup. And when you start getting oil monies, as you just mentioned, rather than go doing the nonsense with sugar, you take the other $40 or $42 billion and you retrain an entire sector into this kind of farming, along with other things. I'm not saying only the 4Ps, but so many other things they could do with a 25-acre plot. And so that will be the rehauling and the rehabilitation of what is called the farmlands there that were once sugar into so much crop. What it also does, as I just mentioned, is food security. If you start getting sweet potatoes, you start getting pumpkins and plantains. And you know, the PPP laughed us about plantain. Oh, Granger setting up plantain factory, plantain chips factory and all kind of thing. Look, plantains in our colonial days used to be treasured by the Bajans and the Trinidadians. They used to say BG plantain is the best plantain. Yeah. Whatever. Remember? They had a calypso about that.
Yeah.
But these
Pharaoh sang a song about BG plantain.
BG plantain, yes. And we can do that. And food prices, we're not going to get people wanting only, affording only 2 meals a day. There will be a flood, as Cherry Jagan used to say, of food on the table when the farmers are doing the right thing with the agriculture and not just a monopoly in monocrop, in sugar in these areas. And the more farmers you got equipped for a diversified food industry, agricultural industry, it is better for the people of the country.
I appreciate that. We go on with that. I wanted to come back to the food security, but I want to touch on very topical issues this week and problems we have. We know we're heading up to elections, and GECOM has been a perpetual problem. They recently said that they will not provide the Alliance for Change or any of the smaller parties with a hard copy of the provisional list of electors, the PLE. Before that, they changed the forms after they announced the schedule for elections. And then we heard that the Attorney General was advising GECOM while he was likely a candidate for one of the contestants, the PPP, in the elections, and he actually turned up at a training session that GECOM had to represent the PPP. Laura, what's your view on the state of affairs in GECOM? You're muted, Laura. You're muted.
To begin with, you were pointing out, should I say the Attorney General? The Attorney General showing up as a candidate of the PPP to participate in all of this, and having been advising GECOM, of course, clearly presents a conflict of interest. It puts GECOM into a position where the citizens have a right to question their fairness, integrity, and the preparation to have general elections, general and regional elections. I believe that a lot of communities are not following properly what exactly is happening. They just know that September 1 has been was announced by the president, and that there are some political parties contesting these elections, but really the internal important, it's not internal, but the important framework that requires a country to be prepared and to trust in the process and the outcome of GECOM is really something that the communities really need to understand. For those of us out here, yeah.
Mm. No, sorry, don't let me cut you. Please continue.
For those of us who are more following it out here, really should be paying attention and calling on GECOM as well. The chairperson, the CEO, call them out on the plain
but
disrespect.
Laura, I think they've been called out frequently and they have one reaction. Cameron, I'm going to throw a hard question at you. If at the end of the electoral process on the 1st of September this year, it becomes evident that GECOM has not properly managed both the run-up to the election and the process on the day, what do you think are some of the likely realistic outcomes from that?
Nigel, it will be a very sad day for the country. It will be an explosive situation.
There are several sad days in the history of this country. So
yes, and elections. Well, it is going to be a lot of people who are going to be provoked into violence, because this is the exact thing that they were asking to be remedied today, days before the elections day. And when the elections day come now and things are not satisfactorily executed, there are going to be very bad behaviors on the streets of Ghana, especially for those who may feel affected negatively or adversely by these events. And that is what I do not see as a good thing for Guyana. I do not want violence in this country. I have long since... No, I don't think anybody wants that. But because of the nature of what you're dealing with, an explosive situation, the stakes are high in an oil economy, people are affected by the fact that we warned you, Elections Commission, please be independent, give us credible elections. We would like biometrics. We've been talking this for 2 years. And now on the day of the elections, let's say there is a nasty set of imposters coming, voting 2 or 3 times, and we are hearing on the ground that certain people in certain PPP strongholds being found with 5, 6 ID cards and so on. What will you think will happen? And it is going to provoke a very bad day. People are going to get very, very violent, in my opinion. And it is not as if, of course, it is something that is welcome, but it could very well lead Guyana down a very bloody road. The internecine warfare that can happen and so on. And that is why I am pleading with the president. I am pleading with the Commission of the Elections Commission. I am pleading with the general regional authorities, CARICOM, to understand that you just don't come on elections day to observe what is happening. You have to be here a couple of weeks before to see everything, and even the run-up to the voters list and everything. But sometimes we just get the observers observing on elections day and they're not understanding. So it is very, very important that we all agree that we are not going to indulge in any kind of nastiness, and so that GECOM carries out and executes its acts and activities and so on in a very good way, so that we can have the elections that is going to be free from any of the negatives that we have had in prior elections.
So I want to ask both of you. There are significant sectors or sections of the community that even if the elections are said to be or certified to be free and fair, they continue to be excluded or feel excluded from the benefits of this oil economy. And quite often the response of the elected party is, well, we were elected and therefore we will run it, or run the country the way we run it, even if it has that consequence. How, especially for you, Kemraj, as a constitutional lawyer, given the constitution we have, given the fact that the people that win power very rarely want to change the structure of the state, how is that feeling of alienation to be addressed? So let's say we have an election and the results are that, one party, especially in a polarized country, gets in and let's say they adopt these policies or continue these policies that result in a feeling of alienation. How do we address that? And this is also open to you, Laura.
Yeah. Well, look, we have always taken, and I personally have always taken a position that whosoever is the winner of credible elections, they must be allowed to govern. But they must also consult the opposition, which represents a large section of people.
But that has not happened. So the question that will come at you, sorry to cut you, is we know that does not happen. So what can we do differently, assuming that
it'll have to deal with better governance at that level. We have to make a paradigm shift as to what we were doing before and inform the present, the then government that would have won. You have to collaborate with the opposition. You have to put up policies and programs that are going to be across the board, that will be beneficial to all and sundry. And so
what happens if it doesn't happen?
Well, if it doesn't happen, we are going to have the violence that I'm talking about. Not only on elections, but you're going to have violence for the improper, discriminatory policies of the government that would have won the elections. We need in Guyana what is called an equality of distribution of the benefits. You see, since this oil economy came on, expectations have grown great. So people now who are alienated and frustrated and not being given the benefits and so on, they're going to be tenfold more alienated. And that is going to provoke violence. Violence arises as a result of inequality. And this government, which pronounced Marxism and so on as its core philosophy, of course they have abandoned it now, they should know that indeed inequality drives what you call violence. The hungry man is the angry man and all of that. So it is very fundamental that they change their positions, and that it's the president, finally, will start that arrangement of trying to call in the opposition, talk to them, engage directly with certain people, and have a situation that is fundamentally different from what we have now. Otherwise, you're going to have the violence.
You have been a member of parliament for the last 5 years. Has there been any engagement with the opposition by the government of the day?
Not as far as I know. It's very, very minimal. It comes around like when Venezuela now talking strong, then, all of a sudden, come please, and they beg you to come and talk to them and so on. But I think apart from that, I haven't seen that engagement, that collaboration, genuine collaboration. But I think that the pressures will come on them. The pressures will come from... There is a pressures coming on them, especially like from the ABCE countries. We met those officials. They are scared as to what can happen. That is why when the pressure came for the commander of that region where 4 tons of cocaine were found, then they transferred him out. Today or yesterday, they had some meeting where the president was talking and the ambassador indicated something about the gold from Venezuela is being smuggled into Guyana, and people are giving the impression that it is gold mined here in Guyana. So we are violating the embargo that the Americans have put on Venezuela, and all of a sudden you see the president, oh yes, Mysterio, we are going to ensure that we do everything to halt whatever is going on there and so on. They are scared and they will grow lots more scared. We have to, and especially utilize these additional forces, international factors, I would call them, and the regional factors, and so on, to ensure that this government be more accommodating to the thing. They are a very polarizing set in the PPP, but I think better sense must prevail. Otherwise, we're going to have what we had in 1962 and so on.
I want to say,
Laura,
I want to say, Nigel.
Go ahead.
I want to say, in addition to what Kemaraj points out, I want to throw this to Guyanese who are listening, or perhaps all Guyanese should hear this, is that we have seen enough of the positions that the PPP has taken over the years. Because it hasn't been, it's not this last 5 years or prior to 2015, that there has been a shift in their position of governance. Their governance structure and position always have been biased, is being based on inequality. In today's news this evening, there's actually where in Region 3, they say that they are looking at informal structures or informal occupiers in Region 3, whom they're looking to regularize. I mean, I'm happy for those. I'm happy for if they're taking that position. But yeah, they call them informal settlers. That's the term they use. In Region 3, they're doing this.
Are you talking about the Venezuelans?
I don't know if they're talking about the Venezuelans. My point is, what exactly, who are deemed informal settlers, and does this mean that those in Mocha whose homes were bulldozed, or in other areas who have been, like literally just displaced, were they then, because we know they call them squatters, but then there's the informal settlers. So my point in saying all of that is Guyanese have lived through their positions or postures that hinge on racism, inequality, and all of these negative stuff where it has not been equal for Guyanese. With elections coming up, Guyanese should go out to make sure that they don't ever go through back this again. Meaning they should not put
Laura,
back the
forgive me
PPP
for
in power.
interrupting you. The reality is that Guyanese have consistently at every single election gone out and voted the traditional way. What makes this election any different from any of its predecessors?
You know what? I
Not the
believe
aspirational stuff, the reality stuff.
Yeah, the reality, but we also have today, Nigel, and this is what I'm looking at Guyanese, is that the reality today is we have so much more access to information, real-time information. We no longer have to wait or be swayed by a printed Mirror or whatever, a Chronicle or these newspapers. We have social media. We can see what's happening in real time. There's no doubt of the corruption. There's no doubt of all these scandals that take place, that the poor governance.
But the Guyanese seem to have a high tolerance for that, don't they? Guyanese seem to have a high tolerance for corruption. They seem to have a high tolerance for theft. They seem to have a high tolerance for governing that is particularly biased in favor of supported. So, without wanting to be aspirational, that has been our consistent pattern. And is there anything to suggest it'll be any different this time?
Well, if I may help Laura,
sure.
There, Nigel. The fact that the government did not want to bring out the report of that census, the census, reflects in my mind, and I think because of knowing of some of the inside information, is that the pattern will probably remain largely that it will be ethnic politics at the ballot box. But because of an arrangement, not an arrangement, but a configuration now where you may have 37% blacks, 39% East Indians, and the Amerindians about 11 or 9, and the mixed race being...
I don't think the Africans have gone as high as 37, have they? They're not somewhere like early 30s, 32, 3,
well, we have seen... Well, this is where the census would have helped us. But we understand that there have been in the vicinity of 37 or thereabouts, and the East Indians 39%. And that is why the PPP don't want to give us the document. They're hiding it from us.
Raj, here's the question. There is no consequence for them not giving us the document. Not even the ABCEU countries have pressured them to release this information. And in classic Guyana cultural style, they don't release it and nothing happens.
Yeah, well, what I'm trying to say is that because of a new configuration as to the ethnicities, the percentages in Guyana, I believe that you can have a situation whereby things can be not very much like what used to happen. Because look, I have a thesis that says 80% of East Indians going to vote for the PPP no matter what. 80% of the Africans or the
African.
they are going to vote for the PNC or APNU or whatever. 20% still independent. And that is where we had come in with the AFC to work on these 20 and 20 on both sides. Good. The whole point of it now is that because the configurations have changed, you can have different percentages at the results. And that is what is scaring the PPP. But moreover, because of years and years of attrition in the sense, and I use the word attrition here very, very artfully, it is important to understand that the younger generation too realize that the corruption and the malgovernance of the PPP, and a lot of them may not want to go vote for the PPP anymore. They're going to stay home. And it is my view that second consideration might also help in a paradigm shift as to what we had earlier, because they're going to say, "Bye, I ain't going and vote anyway." And that is one of the messages I want to bring to our Barbicians here in this AFC on the move in Barbice here. You cannot in your right senses go and vote for that government anymore, especially the 20% that hardly votes for them. Do not go and vote for them. Stay home. It is a better thing. Abstention politics now. So because a number of East Indians, and it happened to me in my village when we started the AFC, we had about 64 members in that area of the village, 48 to 45. And on the day of the elections, 34 votes we got. Donald Ramutar and them laugh and say, "Look, Ramjatan, only 34 votes he got." And I asked some of the fellas who got membership for the AFC, and they start looking me sideways because they said, "By when I've been in there, I see a cup and I saw my hand gone pan a cup." But with all the corruption that has happened, worse and worse year and year after year, a lot of them have indicated that they ain't going to vote no more. And I believe them. I believe a number of them are going to do the same thing as they're telling us. And that is why people like Anil Nandalal has gone to certain Barbice meetings. He didn't get a crowd and he start hollering for the organizer. What kind of thing happening here? He gone to East Coast, Demerara, and he start cussing them down. You got to get some more bigger crowds for me. Because the people now understand that the PPP is a thief in government. Since Cherry Jagan and Janet Jagan died, this is an extraordinarily thief in government. And they can see it. All their big jabats inside of the PPP, all of them get big house, mansion, and so on. One set of big car and all kind of thing. And what are they seeing? Their sons and daughters not getting employed. So it is fundamental in this time around because of the percentages in relation to the ethnic populations, and also this tendency of, as I believe it, reason to ultimately prevail, that you're going to have a distinct shaving away from what is called the emotional vote to a rational vote from a percentage of especially the PPP support base, because they can't take it no more. And they're going to say, "Bye, let me give somebody else a chance." What I would want of them is that the minute they go in the ballot station, they're going to see the cop and they're going to run mad. It's better to stay home. And that is something that is going to tell them that we are not voting for the PPP. And that is important, a lesson. Abstention politics will bring a difference. That's my analysis of the situation now, Nigel, and I hope that it is understood.
I understand that. The question I want to ask you is that if that voter that you're saying abstain says to you, "But who gonna protect me?" what would your response be?
They're not being protected now. If you're getting only 2 meals a day, what kind of protection is that? Your child get 8 subjects GC, can't find a job. You know, and the transportation to come to Georgetown to live at some board and lodging house and so on, to go to UG is massive. A couple of the students' parents have told me that. I mean, we represented 21 of them the other day when the PPP gun locked them up. Remember the sugar workers that were paid at Albion there? Right. And they were telling me. And so you come to their assistance, they know they have what is called confidence in you, and they're giving you the information. So there is no protection from the PPP. The PPP only wants to protect itself and its favorites, family, and flat out the friends. They're nothing else.
But okay, you mentioned at the start of the program that there are a lot of contractors that are making a lot of money. So there must be quite substantial, there must be a substantial body of persons who are PPP supporters that are doing well, and I assume that they're employing people.
No, that is only a couple of them. This crony capitalist contractor class that I have mentioned months and years ago is you can count them on your fingers. It's like a couple hundred of them. And they're the ones that are benefiting from this inequality, and a lot of the Barbicians know and can count them. As a matter of fact, that day you're talking to somebody by the coca, they're pointing out, look at that, there's one of them passed with a big vehicle just now, and so on, and they see it for themselves. So it is going to make a change, in my opinion, and that is what is scaring the PPP. That is why they want to do all kind of manner of, they don't want the biometrics, and they want the imposters to go there and vote 5-6 times one person. That is their fear. We have to be, as an opposition, to pounce on them whenever that kind of thing happen. You remember the last elections? I think it was Amna and Basil Williams had to go to the East Coast, and they find a whole set of ID cards instead of a back trunk. Yeah. So then they master this art too of getting Venezuelans who are now going to get birth certificates because the Tushao says, I know these people, the people born in Guyana, and next thing they're going to get their citizenship. And as a result of that, they could now go and vote. And they're sending a number of them into the interior. So because they're scared, they want them to go into the interior areas, region 1, 7, 8, and so on, for purposes of balancing or gerrymandering the constituency, as it were, with these Venezuelans who they get building houses and so on for. Some of the contractors building houses for them. And this is where we got to talk to these observers. All of this is what is called stealing the elections long before the day.
You've mentioned a very important point there. The amount of Venezuelans that have found their way onto the electoral register, they have birth certificates, so they're entitled to vote. And you've mentioned that a lot of them have been moved to heavily indigenous areas. So Laura, 1, 7, 8, there's likely to be an increase of Venezuelan voters in those areas. I know you're from the Upper Maz, which is in Region 7. Give us your perspective on this.
So,
have you seen an increase of Venezuelans in the indigenous communities in Region 7?
Well, we should probably also include is 1, 2, 7, 8, 9. In the upper
Yeah.
Mazaruni, in the villages, there are no like Venezuelan nationals in the villages per se. Probably very few Guyanese who are living in Venezuela have returned to, let's say, for example, in Parima. Very few in Waramadan. But we haven't seen those numbers in the upper Mazaruni. What I have seen is that in Region 1, for example, in small villages that I know that has small, meaning population, very little population, I've had a glimpse of numbers that are already out as preliminary numbers, and the numbers are questionable because I'm wondering, like, wow, when did our population suddenly increase in these specific areas? I'm keeping track of the numbers. So that's where we're looking into these numbers as to where really did these persons come from, or because I don't believe that.
What do you think? Sorry.
Yeah, I don't believe that Guyanese procreation procreation
Rates.
got an expertise
Has had a
suddenly.
dramatic improvement, like our
Yes.
education results. But let me ask you, so in the Upper Maz, if for some reason you suddenly see coming close to election day and on election day, an increase in the number of Venezuelans in the community, what do you think the likely reaction is going to be in those communities? So you take Philippi, you take Caco, and the week before or 2 weeks before, you see 20 Venezuelans come, because that's probably, it's not going to be much more than that, maybe even less, but you see that trend in the Upper Maz. Well, what do you think the communities are likely to, how they're likely to react?
Well, we know that the general rule is that once someone appears on the official list of electors, then they're allowed to vote. But of course, accompanied with necessary documentation. Um, but
No, but
sudden,
sorry,
but
this
sudden
scenario.
appearance of people turning up, Venezuelans turning up to vote. It's no, it's it really that cannot be. I don't know what legal thing to say. With no, you're not allowed to vote because your name is not on the list. There's
No,
already a
I'm
list
talking
of
about
electors. Mhm.
I'm talking about somebody who, a Venezuelan whose name is on the list. You yourself mentioned increased numbers. So Juan Valdez goes on the list. People in the community don't bother to check. And then somebody turns up, a Venezuelan with an ID card for Juan Valdez to vote. And let's say there are 10 such persons. What is likely to be the reaction in that community?
Um, Nigel, that would be difficult for me to say what is the reaction going to be, but they know they they all know each other who've lived here and who usually have been voting and all of that, and who are residents in their own villages. So we don't have that. I would say that situation that may arise in the Upper Mazaruni. I don't know what is going to be like in Region 1, in the Mabaruma, Matches Ridge regions, because we are aware that there are, like the Waraos that are housed there and other Venezuelan nationals that have been occupying communities or on the outskirts of communities. But those are, as Kemraj was saying earlier, these are information that the persons or the observer groups need to be aware of as well. In terms of any action that they can take, well, no, they cannot take any action other than to say observer. So what can the communities do to that, say or feel about that? I mean, they can feel one way, but doing something about it is another matter for communities that they have not been receiving the support that they would like to receive from the regional governing bodies.
Well, I hear that. I suppose the recommendation to people who see um, strange people turning up in the communities just before elections would be to make a note of it and pass that information on. final question as we're wrapping up. We've seen a new entrant into the political arena, young Mr. Mohammed, who seems to be gathering a lot of support, particularly in indigenous communities and in some of the quarantine, Region 6. Kamraj, what's your assessment of his impact?
Well, knowing the character, having been sanctioned by America, and for some very serious activities, I am very surprised that Guyanese have gone for him in the way that they've done. But there again, I suppose this is one of the silly season outcomes that you have. A new person come on the scene, is being victimized by the government, has quite a lot of monies which we can call from questionable sources and all of that. But whatever it is, he has been picking up a steam. I have noticed, quite frankly, from Babis too, talking to some members of at the bottom of the Albion court there. You know, I normally would do my little political work whenever I go to do these cases that I have. And a lot of them say, man, I'll be there with a new buy. I'll be there with a new buy. Well, you have to indicate, well, fine, no problem. That's your choice. But we need to ask him on certain policies and what he's going to do. And of course, they say, well, boss, I mean, don't care about policy and all of that. We concern with a man that is new. And I have to respect their views, although I try to argue against it and so on. But I believe that he's going to bring additionally a set of taking away, subtracting from the PPP's base. And that is why they're getting very nasty with him. Because there is an attraction to him by the East Indian community. And so
it's not just the East Indian community, though. It's across the board, isn't it?
It is. But I'm talking about Bobby's here. That Bobby's set of people there that I was talking to. And so that is also what is making the PPP even scarier, more scared about what will happen. And that is why I'm saying the dynamics of this elections is going to be all the more different than what we have seen and what you have been talking about. But, you know, they come back to their basic attitude and approach. It will be a change in my view. But that is what I have to say of Azruddin and his team.
Laura, very briefly, he seems to be very popular and well received in indigenous communities. Your assessment?
Oh yeah.
In indigenous communities, I had a very I had a nice discussion yesterday where I was told by someone that the reason that some persons or some communities may want to support Mohammed is because, you know, they're tired of the PPP, they're tired of the PNC. Somewhere along the line, the AFC wasn't there because they got swallowed in by APNU. But, sorry, Nigel. But what they say is they're disappointed by the LJP having been, you know, wanting to try a new one. And so they have seen how he's gone. So they're willing to try another new one. And I was like, all right. So I'm explaining to them, and I understand the situation, Nigel, where Guyanese, so many of us are so impoverished. So when we see someone pop up, you know, who has the glass and the beads and the Lamborghini, and we believe that this is an answer to our prayers, it is misleading, you know. And as Kamraj is saying, Guyanese deserve full information, truthful information, that they understand exactly what's happening, and that Mohammed is able to let them know, this is how I'm going to make it better, improve the situation in Guyana. How he's gonna have a good governance system or have good systems in place that no one should be able to call or message a president seeking concessions from paying taxes and all of that. You know, we mustn't have systems like that in a situation in Guyana. So he has to show, he must have his policy in terms of how he's going to make sure that the police force, for example, is strengthened, is transparent and free of scandal, that no citizen should be sanctioned by a foreign nationals when in our own country something was overseen, that somebody else is sanctioning somebody above the government itself in the own country. So those are things that Guyanese, indigenous peoples, yes, but also Guyanese, who are all very much vying for him, need to really understand. But as Kemrad said, many that he's spoken with, they don't have time with policy. They don't need to understand it because the need now, it's desperate. But really Guyanese need to also know that the AFC is here. We are here because we would like to make sure that our citizens can live in fairness, equality, justice, and that the resources that we have really is accessible to all Guyanese. So
great wrap up, Kemraj. No, sorry.
Yeah, well, I endorse fully what Laura
Sorry, I cut you short, Laura. Did I cut you short?
No, go ahead.
No, sorry about that because we're out of time. Go ahead, Kemraj, wrap up.
Yeah, look, I just want to tell Barbicians this evening that, look, it is important that you start thinking reason rather than emotion, because it's emotion that has put us here. You know, the all the wrong things that are happening now. When you go Barbice, they cussing that there's lots of corruption, this, that, whatever. What caused that is largely their support for the PPP. That is the constituency, whenever the elections results come out, that puts the PPP back into government. And so it is important that they now start reasoning and understanding that one of the best things that we can do is that we will have what is called our consciences telling us what to do now. Stay away from it, Barbicians, especially the PPP support base. There is absolutely no reason why you should go and vote for the PPP. Stay home. We know that you're vexed with PNC, you're vexed with AFC, you're vexed with everybody. But not because you're vexed with we, make you go and vote for the PPP. What have they done but to give you 2 meals a day or less than that? What have they done but seen an inequality that is so stark? It is beyond your imagination coming from a working class government. What have they done to the sugar industry? Spending billions and not giving you a piece of land for alternative livelihoods. What have they really done for the education and health sector, Barbies? And that is one of the reasons you should stay home. I hope that you do that.
With that, I thank you, Laura. A big thanks, Kemraj, as well. And thanks to Dave's TV, to our viewers in Berbice, regions 5 and 6. We thank you for having spent the evening with us. This has been a very interesting discussion on matters that are really not on the surface. They're matters that we invite you to think about as you go forward. We didn't come to try to sell you anything, but we want you to think deeply about the future of the country because it's your future. So good night, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of the weekend, and we will see you next week. Good night.